The rule of life, it is this concept that basically it's like a craft almost of creating a guide or a structure, and as it says, a rule to follow in your life that structures you in a way that draws you closer to God. It's the disciplines and things we do daily, weekly, monthly, annually. It's the activities we do that are physical. It's basically how we live our life. And it encapsulates so much more than spiritual disciplines. I think a lot of people just assume the rule of life is, hey, make sure you pray every day, make sure you read your Bible every day. But there's so much more to it than that. It's how you manage all of these things and what aspects of your life draw you closer to God, and what those life-giving hobbies that you do, what those are, and how you do them, and at what rhythms, right? It's the rhythms of your life. Uh, so let's talk about the rule of life. Welcome to the first episode of the Lighthouse Podcast. My name is Caleb Griffin. If you're listening wherever you are, please follow. You can also find a video version of this on YouTube at Caleb Griffin _ the Lighthouse Pod. But the rule of life. Now, I've had my first crack at crafting a rule of life because of seminary. I'm brand new to this, but I have found that in the first couple of months of trying to follow this rule of life, it has absolutely impacted me in positive ways for sure, and it's drawing me closer to God on a daily basis. And now some of these disciplines I have been doing for a long time, and some of these are brand new to me. So I'm not an expert on the rule of life. In fact, there's an entire history about the rule of life that I won't get into today. But if you are interested in that, I encourage you to research it a little bit, because it really is helpful. I mean, more than helpful, but just keep in mind, I'm not an expert, but this is me talking about why I think the rule of life is important. We'll go into aspects about my rule of life and trying to get more information about it out there, right? So think about a trellis for a second. A trellis is this wooden structure for plants. And if you don't know what a trellis is, you can look up trellis and you'll see what I'm talking about. But it's like they have like those X's in them and everything, and the vines grow up these trellises, right? If you see a picture of one, you would know what I'm talking about. But without a trellis and a vine not being properly supported, it's chaotic, and it's often laying on the ground and people trample all over it, and it's unable to bear fruit, right? As Christians, if we don't have a trellis or a structure, something that supports us, and supports those intentional practices that we do, we're just like those vines, right? Like we're on the ground, we're unsupported, and we cannot produce fruit, which is we need to be producing fruit. So without that structure, without a rule of life, we can become aimless, spiritually stagnant, more vulnerable to temptation, all those things, right? But with that structure, we can walk throughout our life and live a life that draws us closer to God each and every single day, right? And it's not, once again, it's not just spiritual practices, but there are things that are fun and restful, that are relaxing. It's not just discipline, discipline, discipline. The last thing I want is for somebody to watch this video and just be like, oh my gosh, it's just make sure you pray every day and read every day. And I don't know. Like, no, it's more than that, right? Those things are incorporated in it, absolutely, but there is so much more to a rule of life. It is meant to be life-giving. And as I've started to follow mine, like I said earlier, like there's effects on my life because of it. So what elements are in the rule of life? The first thing to note is that like we are creatures of desire. A lot of this is coming heavily off of Ruth Barton's book called Sacred Rhythms, which has great tips on crafting a rule of life, and it's a very affordable book. I'd highly recommend it, and I don't recommend books often, but we are creatures of desire. And what we desire in life, our actions are going to reflect that. If you desire to do nothing all day, your actions are going to be lazy. If you desire money, your actions are going to be more focused on how do I make the most money in the quickest amount of time possible, right? And if we love Christ, if we desire Christ, then our actions are going to draw us closer to Him, right? So the rule of life helps us orient our desire in our life in Christ, right? So how badly do you want to chase after Christ is the question you need to ask yourself before you craft a rule of life. Like, is Christ your like truest desire? If we look at Mark 10:46 through 52, Bartimaeus is the blind man on the road to Jericho, right? And he's shouting out like, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus, after the crowd had rebuked Bartimaeus, or the disciples bring him to Jesus, and Jesus says, what do you want me to do for you, right? And I'm thinking, well, that question has an obvious answer. Obviously, Bartimaeus wants him to heal his sight, right? But when you think more deeply into that story, you see that Jesus is asking, what is your desire? What do you want me to do for you? And what the rule of life helps us to do is answer that question when Jesus asks us, because Jesus asks us that same question, what do you want me to do for you? And that's what the rule of life is based around. It's that question, what do you want me to do for you? So when crafting your rule of life, focus on what your heart truly desires and how your rule of life can help you focus that desire on Christ. So for instance, maybe your heart's desire is a calling. You don't know what God's calling you to do or what you're supposed to be, but you just want to have that, right? You want that comfort from Christ, knowing like you put me on this earth to do this, right? And what is that? What does that draw you to do, right? What does that draw you to add in your rule of life? Maybe it's a day of discernment or something like that. Maybe your desire is to be free from addiction, whatever type of addiction it may be. So what does that draw you to do every single day? For me this year, I've been like super, super busy, new job, seminary, trying to do this whole thing. And like, I don't have a whole lot of free time. And so my desire has been rest this year. So I've been drawn to Sabbath, and I've included that, which it should have already been in my rule of life. But I've started to be a lot more intentional about making sure I have that day to rest and not work. And I've added that into my rule of life. Maybe you're anxious and your desire is just for Jesus to be your Prince of Peace. So how do you incorporate that desire into your rule of life? Those are the questions you need to ask yourself when crafting your rule of life. So the first element is desire. The second is considering your experiences. What spiritual practices have been most effective for you? Which ones have you turned to when you have felt most disheartened? Like, do you struggle with quiet time? And do you gravitate more to like a lot of corporate worship because you struggle to do it alone? And do you turn to music when you need comfort instead of like, being by yourself? Because people are different. So consider those things, right? And not only spiritual practices, but other things as well. Maybe you feel at peace when you're in nature and you're taking in God's beauty and creation. So you can add a nature walk into your rule of life. Maybe you love having time to yourself, so you can add solitude to your rule of life. That's something that I've done. And maybe you have certain friends that you love and have helped you in your faith walk, and that you want to make sure you are intentional about carving out time to spend with. So you incorporate a way to see your friends in your rule of life, right? For some people, and unfortunately it isn't me, going to the gym helps people draw closer to God. So you can add that and being physically active and having to rely on God to help you finish a workout set or finish a mile run or something like that, and it draws you closer to God. So once again, you consider your desire, you consider your experiences, and then you start to build a plan around that. And think, what disciplines do I need to do daily, weekly, and what activities do I need to do more of? What people do I need to spend time with every month or every week? And then you can begin to develop a plan. So keep in mind too, these plans are never set in stone. Like, I'm 22, okay? I'm young. And my rule of life this year, my season of life, I assure you, is going to be different when I get married, when I eventually, way in the future, have kids. If I'm still a youth pastor then, or if I'm not still a youth pastor then, right? Like, all of those are questions that, aren't going to get answered till like way further down in life. But when those things change, then my rule of life is probably going to change around that, right? Because I have things that I carve out time for right now that might not be as effective, or I might just not be able to later on in the future, right? So keep in mind that just because you're making a rule of life doesn't mean that rule of life can't change based on where you are, right? Like, I'm coming up on summer, right? And the organization at my church is going to look different than it did in the fall and the spring. And that's going to affect my rule of life, right? So keep in mind that this thing is going to change. And then the last thing that you need to keep in mind when crafting a rule of life is that you need to have an openness to accountability. This isn't just for the rule of life, but this is anything you do, any career you're going to have, any class you're going to take, any friendships or relationships you're going to get into, anything you do needs to be open to accountability. You need to be open to people holding you accountable for doing what you say you're going to do, and having someone hold you accountable to the standards and disciplines you say you're going to do is very important to not only like crafting a rule of life, but getting started. And once you get started, it just becomes second nature. It becomes a rhythm that you're into, right? Same as like every single day waking up and brushing your teeth. That's a rhythm, right? That's a rhythm to your day, and that's what these things do. Rule of life, it also needs to aim your life for love of God and love of others. For example, I love playing pickleball. I love playing Mario Kart. Um, I love watching movies with my friends, right? And these things in and of themselves aren't necessarily bad, but they're not crafted into my rule of life, because when I play pickleball or Mario Kart with my friends, I get really, really competitive, and my actions and my words don't always reflect Christ, hardly ever, because I'm ultra competitive in those things, and I can yell or I can scream, I can, act in ways I shouldn't, right? And I love movies. I'm a huge movie buff, but there are movies that like are not appropriate, that I shouldn't be watching. So those aren't things that I'm going to put into my rule of life to say, okay, once a week I'm going to go watch a movie, right? Because that's not reflecting the heart of Christ, right? Now, if you have, let's say, you have a family and you want to watch a family movie with your family once a week or once a month, that can be crafted into your rule of life. You need to be careful with something like that. But if that is what draws you closer to your family and reflects love of others, that's a great thing, and you could easily add that, right? But for me, and same with pickleball, if you love playing pickleball and you really feel that draws you closer to Christ, sure, add that into your real life. But for me, that doesn't, right? So even though I like doing those things, if it's not aiming my heart and my life for love of God and others, I don't craft out time for it, if that makes sense, right? So just because you enjoy an action and even find peace in that action, if it doesn't draw you closer to God, it shouldn't be part of your rule of life, right? It doesn't mean you can't play pickleball or I can't play pickleball. I can. It's just not part of my rhythm, if that makes sense. So, an example of a hobby that I've started that has aimed my life towards love of God and love of others, that I have found peace in, that I have found comfort in, that has become a rhythm in my life, is making coffee. I was looking at my finances and I was trying to see, how I could save more money. Um, and I realized, okay, Caleb, you are spending way too much money on coffee. And it's true. Um, every day, if not every day, every other day, I was buying a $4 to $7 coffee, or on days where I was in a rush and I couldn't wait at a coffee shop for an order to get done, it was an energy drink from a gas station. And energy drinks are like crazy expensive nowadays. It's like I got one a month ago that was like four. That's besides the point. Anyways, but I was spending too much money on caffeine basically, and I'm a big espresso guy. Like I love espresso. Like even if it's just an espresso shot, and like specialty drinks with espresso and stuff like that too. And that's what I always ordered. So I decided, while I was saving money, I was going to spend even more money on an espresso machine, so I wouldn't have to go and buy coffee every single day. And I wasn't expecting it to be a comforting task, but even before I get the caffeine boost of the espresso, the whole process of, scooping the coffee beans, putting them in the grinder, grinding the beans into the pot of filter, tamping them down, and like watching the machine extract the espresso shot was like super, super comforting. And it gave me time to like pray during that process, right? It gave me time to speak to God. It didn't start my day off hurried. I was able to take my time through this process, and I'm very bad about praying in the morning too. Like at night, I'm very, very good about saying a nighttime prayer. But when I wake up, um, it's one of those things I struggle with, to wake up and the first thing I do be pray for some reason. So letting myself not be hurried into getting showered and dressed and off to the church, it slows me down and allows me to understand that I still am in the presence of God, because God is everywhere, right? Gives me time to talk, while I'm tamping down the coffee grounds and things like that. So for me, the whole process of making coffee has aimed my life or my day to start closer to God. And it's been a real blessing for me. So that is now incorporated into my rule of life. That's not just a hobby anymore, right? That is something I do every day and make it intentional to do it every single day. And then on the flip side of that, of course, I do get the caffeine boost, which helps me interact with people better. Um, it's not like an energy drink every day, because my sophomore year of college, I did drink an energy drink every single day, and without one, I couldn't function. But the espresso is a lot less than that, so it's enough for me to like communicate properly with people to get my day started without a big crash at the end of the day. And if I do happen to miss a day, like I'm not stressing, I guess, you know what I mean? Um, but it also allows me to like, make coffee for other people. Like my sister, she loves espresso, and she'll say, "Hey, Caleb, can you make me something?" And I enjoy that because it gives me something to do that does something for somebody else. And so for me, that's an example of a hobby that has aimed my life towards Christ and towards helping others in a way. So that's become part of my, rule of life in those ways, right? So also, you need to think about not just those life-giving hobbies, but where do those life-giving hobbies fit? Stephen Macchia, he has done a lot of work on the rule of life, and he talks about how there are these 5 big buckets that we put things into. There's spiritual, there's relational, there's missional, there's financial, and I'm blanking on the other one, but I'll figure it out in a second. But each of these buckets, we put these actions or these disciplines into, right? So let's start with spiritually. What prayer and scripture rhythm practices and rhythms are you going to follow spiritually? And are you going to do them every day or every week? Are you going to read every day? Are you going to have quiet time every single day? How will you pray every day? Because prayer should be an everyday thing. Do you have like a special prayer that you like to do once a week? Like maybe you like praying through the Psalms, and so once a week you say, I'm going to pray through one of the Psalms, right? Do you struggle to pray for long periods of time and just simply like want to scatter little prayers throughout your day? Like be intentional about thinking about that stuff. Like when you take time to listen to God, do you see yourself as a person who would benefit from like a yearly retreat away from everybody just to spend a long time in a day in prayer, right? And that would be like an annual thing, right? So think spiritually and how you practice prayer and those types of disciplines, right? Next is relationally. So think what people in my life are the most important. And if you're married, that would be your husband or wife, that would be your kids, things like that, right? And how do you maintain those relationships? How do you have a faithful presence like with your friends and with your loved ones, right? For me, it's been hard to do since I graduated college and I left and moved out of my college town. Not too far away, it's still driving distance, but it is a little bit of a lengthy drive, so it's not always the easiest thing for me to just like take that drive back to my college town and see my friends who are still living there, right? And one of my friends is graduating. This video is going to come out. Will have been graduated by the time this video comes out, and is moving to a new city that is even further away, right? And it's hard to like figure out how in this season of my life am I going to maintain presence with my friends who are getting jobs, who are getting married, who are going on to different phases of life, right? Because these friends are important to me, and I have friends, thankfully God has put amazing people in my life who have helped me grow in my faith and have helped me understand my calling and have prayed with me, have prayed for me. And it's hard, to see all of them leave. And I got to figure out a way for me to relationally keep those relationships going and faithfully. So for me, it's like once a month, I'm going to do something. If I have to drive, I'm going to drive. If we have to play a video game together online, we're going to play a video game together online. If I have to call them and spend an hour talking to them, that's what I'm going to do. But once a month at least, that's part of my rule of life where I'm going to be intentional about making sure I am seeing my friends, right? And I am spending time with them and keeping those relationships going, right? So think about those things, right? And maybe you have people that are pulling you down or away from Christ, and you need to set boundaries with those people. Who do you need to listen to? Who do you need to pull away from? Who are the people that you need to empathize with? And who are the people you need to show gratitude for, right? And what can you incorporate in your rule of life to do all of those things? To maintain relationships with people you need to, and get out of relationships that you don't need to be in anymore. Okay? And then we get to the physical bucket of the rule of life. And part of the rule of life is treating your body as a temple, as 1 Corinthians 6:19 tells us. So part of the rule of life is treating your body as a temple. 1 Corinthians 6:19, as it tells us, don't you know that your body is a temple? Because we have the Holy Spirit, and likewise we need to treat it as such. So in your rule of life, you need ways to care for your body, right? Your mind and your heart. So what eating habits might you consider adding and removing? What exercise do you need to do? You might not be a big gym person. I'm not a big gym person. I tried, but it's been really hard for me to find fun ways to be active since I'm no longer living with my friends. I try my best to go at least 3 times a week, and I fell a lot. So I'm currently working on figuring out how to be intentional about being more physically active, because it is important to do that. And eating well, right? I don't eat the best, but I am like cutting back on things and drinking more water and things like that. But as I'm still trying to craft my rule of life as I'm walking through it, trying to find ways to be intentional about that has been a difficult challenge for me. For you, it might not be though. And then how do I also take care of my mind, right? Because that's also important. For me right now in seminary, that's not that hard because I'm reading something every single day. If you have ever gone to seminary, you understand, but it's so much reading. But this summer coming up, I'm not going to be in classes, so I need to find ways to keep growing intellectually. So I'm going to, I say this painfully because I don't enjoy reading, but that's part of the discipline aspect of the rule of life. But I'm going to read something that's not, the Bible, at least once a week, even if it's a chapter of a book. It can be a fiction book, it can be a theology book, but keep building your mind, right? Keeping yourself intellectually stimulated is also part of taking care of your body physically. So then there's financially, and it's asking the question of how you can use your money and material resources to show Christ to the people around you. Will you tithe? Are you stewarding your resources to help others? You may be in a season where you don't have a lot of money. I'm a recent college graduate, I understand. So what material resources can you use to help people? Can you host people in your home? Can you provide carpool for your coworkers? Maybe you need to donate some old clothes you don't wear anymore or something like that. Give away items that could be beneficial to others that you don't use. Are you sharing your resources in a way that glorifies God? And are you being responsible with your resources? Are you saving money? Are you not done foolishly spending? Like for me, part of my rule of life is a quarterly financial outlook to see like, where am I wasting money? Where am I stewarding my funds? And that's how I ended up coming to the realization about the coffee thing earlier, that I needed to stop spending money on caffeine, right? So do things like that. So for me, part of my rule of life is a quarterly financial inspection where I look back on everything and see how am I spending money, right? And that's a big part of the rule of life, is how you handle your finances. And then finally, the other one is missionally. That's the one I forgot. How can you serve others with the talents that you have? Is there a community organization that you can help with? Maybe you can volunteer your time once a month at a soup kitchen. Maybe you can volunteer at your church. If you're good with technology, you can help the tech team, or you can help your church's missional efforts. Things like that. Are you doing things missionally? It doesn't have to be a huge mission trip every year. It can be, if that's something you're called to, is international mission, then absolutely that can be part of your whole life, but it doesn't have to be. For me, there's a few different things I have in mind missionally, which is helping my church with tech. And once a year, our youth group goes on a big mission trip, and that's what is part of my rule of life as far as missional things. And then there's other things scattered throughout that. Every fifth Sunday that we have in the calendar year, our church does some type of mission thing for the community, whether it be building beds or packing meals or mowing lawns, whatever it may be. And that's also crafted into my rule of life, right? So find those types of things that you can do missionally and craft that and be intentional about that, right? So there are a lot of online resources you can use or find that will help you in crafting a rule of life and doing things like that. And I just lost my place. In light of Stephen Machi's writings on the rule of life, there's a chart that has like weekly, daily daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, with those 5 buckets we just talked about on the top row, and you can like craft out your rule of life in a chart if something visible helps you. If it does, I highly suggest that. But what I'm going to do is kind of go through my rule of life quickly from all of these buckets to kind of show you like what a large out thought out one looks like. I'm not going to spend too much time on that because I've already talked about some of those things a lot. But starting in the spiritual bucket, daily rule of life, prayer, scripture reading, and solitude. Prayer for me is scattered throughout the day. I'm bad about praying in the morning. I've already talked about that. Praying before I eat meals, praying at night, things like that before I go to bed and all that. And then communal prayer with the rest of my church staff, with my family, with my girlfriend, with my friends, whoever it may be. But praying communally is also part of my daily rule of life. It doesn't have to be the same people every day, but making sure that I'm not alone in my prayer at least once a day is part of mine. And then scripture reading, self-explanatory, making sure I'm in the Word every single day, and solitude. In my solitude time, I start with prayer, so that helps. But for me, solitude is just, I find rest in it, and it's me being able to spend time alone with God and not have to worry about the outside, finding a quiet, desolate place to reside to, and I do this once a day, or try to. There are days that I've been failing, especially recently, so I need to do better about that. But when I do find time to do solitude, and I need to be more intentional about making it an everyday thing, it allows me to have time with God, to listen for God, because that's also part of prayer, is listening to God. And it's a daily discipline that I really want to do better at, and things like that. So, weekly, I attend church. That can go into a lot of these buckets: the spiritual bucket, the relational bucket. If you volunteer at a church, the missional bucket as well. So I put this in my spiritual bucket, though, but it could really fit in a bunch of them. But I attend a church service once a week. And then also weekly, I do my best to practice the art of practicing and examine. So looking back on my week, seeing like where I fell short, seeing where I most felt the presence of God, understanding trying to understand how I treated people, and if that was always the best way to do so, or best way to handle situations. So that's something I do weekly. Monthly, I partake in communion. This is also part of my spiritual bucket. And then annually, I don't have anything quarterly in my spiritual bucket, but annually, I plan on doing this summer, but a day of discernment is what I'm going to call it. So right now, I'm an associate youth pastor, and I honestly can't see myself doing anything that isn't youth ministry for the rest of my life. But as I've already mentioned, I'm 22. That could very well change 10, 20, 30 years from now, I don't know where God's calling me I guess this would be, youth would be long term, but I don't know where God's calling me longer ways away from now, if you understand what I'm trying to say. So once a year, having a day to discern, am I still doing what God's called me to do? Am I where God wants me to be? And making it an intentional day to go out and pray, right? And for other people, discernment might be a monthly practice, quarterly practice. For me, we'll see after I have my first go at it, but trying to have a day just specifically for discernment, I'm hoping will help. And it's something I'm excited to try. Okay, so then moving to the relational bucket. Daily for me is just basic forms of communication with loved ones, sending a text to my mom, talking to my sisters, spending time with my girlfriend, saying hey to people I come in contact with, being friendly. That should be part of everybody's daily rule of life, talking to somebody, right? Having day-to-day conversations, not isolating myself all day, but, fostering relationships, simply saying like, hey, how are you doing today? Things like that. Weekly, I put quality time with loved ones, and I'm not specific here because it could be different things, but quality time. So going and taking my mom out for a meal, going on a date, you know, taking time to spend more than an hour with somebody and continue to build that relationship, right? Things that aren't rushed, like basic forms of communication can be, but things that are etched out, as in, this is my time I'm going to spend with you, not spending on my phone or not, distracted, but me and you one-on-one time. It could be playing a board game with somebody. It could be with a group of people, but that's part of my weekly rule of life relationally. And then monthly, I've already talked about this, but making sure that I see my closest friends, or at least talk to my closest friends and do something fun with them uh, once a month. Back in April, that thing was watching WrestleMania with one of my best friends, and WrestleMania is not the most godly thing ever, but having that time with my friend was special to me, So that was part of it, right? Um, Coming up this month, like I said, a couple of my friends are graduating, and one of my friends is getting married within the next 2 weeks. So busy, busy, busy time for all of them. I'm feeling bad for myself because I have a lot to do, but I really shouldn't because I'm not the one who has all the major life stuff going on right now. But yeah, so this weekend I will be at my old college town for graduations, and then I will come back the next weekend for a wedding. So those are those times where I get to spend quality time with those friends once a month. Um, and then uh, either quarterly or once a year. Haven't decided yet, but having intentional conversations about my future. So this includes my girlfriend when we see ourselves getting married. This includes like my pastor and my boss, our head youth minister, to make sure that like we're preparing ourselves for our ministry in the future and our ministry moving forward. Having those conversations about the future and making sure that like everyone who needs to be, or everyone that I need to be on the same page with, like I'm on the same page with, if that makes sense. So then physically, daily I make coffee and I diet. I'm not saying diet like I do a keto thing or anything like that, but I do my best to eat well. Drink water, not just soda, not just sweet tea, but drink water and eat well. Don't eat excessively. Things like that. Weekly, I have physical exercise, and as I mentioned earlier, the gym at least 3 times a week until I find something that keeps me active and keeps me in shape that I actually do enjoy doing, whether that be, playing basketball, because that's what I used to do in high school, or I don't know, whatever it may be. I'm still working on something. If you have any suggestions, please let me know. And if you are tired of me complaining about the gym and say, Caleb, just suck it up, you can also put that in the comments. That's fine. I probably need to hear it. But um, I also talked about reading a little bit, different than biblical spiritual reading, but weekly. That's also part of my weekly. That is also part of my rule of life when it comes to doing things that are physical. And then annually, I have fasting and vacation. I plan on fasting. I want to do it twice a year. It could be different types of fast, but we'll see. And then vacation. Every other year, me and my family went on vacation, but now me and all my siblings are grown. Um, and so, our family doesn't go on vacations together like they used to. So now it's up to me to make sure I have that time kind of away from my town, just to spend, whether it's with a loved one or not, but just to have, a little bit of fun, take some time away. It's very important to me to have that at least once a year. It can be a weekend trip. It doesn't have to be a whole big thing, but at least once a year getting out, if that makes sense, right? Um, and then finally we get to financially, which I have weekly tithe, quarterly financial planning, spending money responsibly, saving well, and using my money and resources in ways that can uh, show the light of Christ to people, which so far that is weekly tithe and my financial planning to make sure that when things do come up that involve help, because right now there's not a specific thing that I give to other than my tithe, but if somebody at the church needs help with something, or if I can take like a friend out to eat or something and pay for it, or little things like that here and there that I do for giving instead of just like one big like monthly giving type thing that I know a lot of people do. And if that's good for you, then great, do it. But for me right now, I think the best way I can work missionally financially is through little things like here and there, buying somebody um, a meal, or if picking up the check or something like that. I think that's a great way to do it. Um, if the church is raising money for a mission, even if it's $10, $15, give a little bit. And then missionally, this is incorporated to my daily prayer. as well. But at some point, asking God, what mission are you calling me to? Where are you calling me right now? Where should I go this year? Is there a person or an organization that I do need to help? And also praying for others who are on mission or who are out of the. I have plenty of friends who have worked with YWAM in the past and have gone on these like really lengthy international trips. So praying for those people as well, and praying that God works through me when I have the opportunity to do things missionally. Weekly, it's worship and technology. If I'm either playing music or I'm working tech, and I find that as a good way to work missionally for the church, to use the talents that I have to help in any way that I can. Right. Um, Quarterly, I have preaching. This is probably something I do 3 to 4 times a year. I have, I preach in front of my congregation. Um, I don't remember the first time that I did it. I've had other opportunities, and then on June 1st and June 8th, this coming month, will be another opportunity for me to do that. So pray for me that that goes well. Maybe I'll post some clips of it on here or something. I don't know. But, and then annually, mission trip. Me and my youth group are going on a mission trip this summer. And that's an annual thing that will be part of my rule of life now, which will be a chance to serve those in need and share the gospel to the unreached. And that's something I'm looking forward to. Oh man, I should have brought like a glass of water or something. But I hope this has helped explain the rule of life, and I hope my example helps or gives some inspiration on how you can craft your own. Um, from my 2 month experience practicing this, I have found it very, very helpful. I slip up sometimes, but it's all about starting to get into a rhythm to where when it's something that you don't do, you kind of feel it, and having that rhythm to your life and doing things in a way that draw you closer to God, whatever it may be. But once again, I want to put this in your minds, because at the end of the day, this is just a structure, you know. Um, if you go back to my first YouTube video, I talked about the Valley of Dry Bones and how after Ezekiel prophesied over them, they were just bodies that were there, right? They weren't, living. And that's because they didn't have the Spirit. They were structures, right? But the Spirit hadn't entered them yet. But when the Spirit did enter, they had life, right? When the breath of God entered, they had life. And going to church, following a rule of life, doing the same disciplines daily, those are great. But if it's not Spirit empowered, then it's just a structure, right? There's no fruit coming off of the trellis, if that makes sense, right? So make sure that when you are doing this, that you are doing this through the Spirit and not through your own, strength, because at that point it's just a structure with no life. But anyways, love you guys. Thank you so much for listening or watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.